Fairy tales weave dreams of magic, adventure, and promises of love that conquer all, wrapping young hearts in a warm illusion of hope. For Kalia, those dreams had long since crumbled, their glow snuffed out by a world that valued strength above all else. Born a shifter without a wolf, she was a paradox in a pack where dominance was everything, a cruel twist of fate that marked her as less than whole. Her parents, once fierce and protective, were gone, their absence leaving her to navigate a life where she was little more than a shadow. By her 18th birthday, Kalia had mastered the art of fading into the background, unseen and unnoticed. It was safer that way. But fate, it seemed, had other plans, and one night would unravel everything she'd worked to keep hidden. The lunar festival filled the pack's great hall with light and sound, a vibrant celebration of those coming of age, their wolves awakening under the full moon's call. Kalia stood at the edge of the crowd, her simple blue dress chosen to blend into the sea of faces. She tugged at the hem, her fingers restless, her eyes darting to avoid the curious glances and whispered remarks that followed her like a persistent breeze. The pack's laughter and chatter swirled around her, a reminder of her place, or lack thereof. She was here out of obligation, not joy, her presence a formality for a milestone that mocked her. No wolf would awaken for her tonight. She'd resigned herself to that truth long ago. Her plan was simple: stay long enough to be seen, then slip away before anyone noticed. It was working, until a voice shattered the noise like a thunderclap. Kalia Eldrin. The words rolled off Riven's tongue like a decree, silencing the hall in an instant. The laughter died, the chatter evaporated, and every eye turned to her. Kalia froze, her heart lurching into her throat. Riven stood at the center of the hall, his tall frame commanding the space, his dark eyes cutting through the crowd with an intensity that made her pulse spike. He was everything an alpha should be, broad-shouldered, composed, with a magnetic presence that drew every gaze. His dark hair fell in waves, framing a face carved with sharp angles and a faint scar above his brow, a mark of battles won. He was untouchable, revered, the last person who should know her name, let alone speak it aloud. The crowd parted as he approached, their murmurs a low hum of curiosity and suspicion. Kalia's chest tightened, her mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. Had she broken some rule, overstepped in some way she hadn't noticed? Her breath hitched as he stopped before her, his presence overwhelming, the faint scent of cedar and musk filling her senses. He towered over her, his broad shoulders blocking out the flickering torchlight, his gaze pinning her in place. He said, "Come with me," his voice low and commanding, leaving no room for refusal. Kalia hesitated, her eyes flickering to the pack members around her. Their faces were masks of intrigue, some laced with disdain, others with confusion. "Alpha," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "have I done something wrong?" Riven's jaw tightened, a flicker of something, perhaps regret or frustration crossing his dark eyes. "Just come." The room watched in stunned silence as Kalia followed him, her steps unsteady, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. They moved through the hall's heavy oak doors and into the cool night air. The crisp scent of pine and the hum of cicadas replaced the warmth of the crowd. The full moon hung low, casting silver light over the forest, its glow both beautiful and mocking. Kalia kept her head down, her fingers twisting the fabric of her dress as she tried to make sense of the moment. She'd spent her life avoiding attention, perfecting the art of being invisible. Now the Alpha himself was leading her away, and the weight of his presence made her feel more exposed than ever. They stopped in a secluded clearing, the moonlight filtering through the trees, painting sharp shadows across Riven's angular features. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable, the silence between them heavy with unspoken tension. "You turned 18 today," he said finally, his voice steady but edged with something she couldn't place. She nodded, her throat tight. Her birthday wasn't a celebration. It was a reminder of her failure, a milestone that underscored her lack of a wolf. "Yes, Alpha." He took a step closer, his dark eyes piercing, searching her face. "Do you know what that means?" She shook her head, dread pooling in her stomach. "No, Alpha." He exhaled, a sound laced with frustration, his shoulders tensing. "It means the bond has awakened." Her brows knitted together, confusion warring with the growing unease in her chest. "The bond? You're my mate, Kalia." The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, her mind reeling to process their meaning. The mate bond was sacred, a connection ordained by fate, a tie that bound two souls in a way that transcended choice. But why her? Why would fate choose someone like her, a wolfless outcast, a girl who couldn't even shift, for someone like him, the pack's alpha, its heart and strength? "That can't be," she whispered, shaking her head, her voice trembling. "You must be mistaken." "I wish I were," Riven muttered, his tone bitter, cutting deeper than any blade. He turned away, his back rigid, the moonlight casting him in stark relief against the trees. "The bond doesn't lie." His voice dropped, barely audible. "I can't accept this. The pack needs a strong Luna, someone who can lead, who can fight, not a girl who can't even shift." The words were a dagger to her chest, sharp and merciless, slicing through the fragile hope the bond had sparked. Kalia felt the sting of tears, but forced them back, refusing to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the ache tearing through her. "If that's your decision, I'll respect it." Riven's head snapped toward her, his dark eyes narrowing as if her calm acceptance surprised him. "That's it? No fight? No protest?" She met his gaze, her own filled with quiet defiance, though her heart was shattering. "You've made it clear where you stand, Alpha. I won't beg for something that was never mine to begin with." For a moment, he stared at her, his expression unreadable, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. His lips twisted into a bitter smile, a flicker of something, maybe guilt, passing through his eyes. "You're stronger than you look, Kalia Eldrin," he said, stepping closer. So close she could see the scar above her brow, the tension in her jaw. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice softer now, heavy with something unspoken. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the night, leaving her alone in the moonlit clearing. Kalia stood frozen, her heart a tangled mess of pain, confusion, and defiance. She'd always been an outsider, a ghost in her own pack, tolerated but never truly accepted. Now she was something worse, a rejected mate, bound by fate to someone who saw her as unworthy. The bond hummed faintly within her, a cruel reminder of what could have been, a thread she hadn't even had time to understand. Riven thought he could walk away, but fate had a way of defying even the strongest wills, and Kalia wasn't ready to let hers be written without a fight. The weight of his rejection clung to her like a heavy cloak as she trudged back to her small room at the pack's lodge. The moonlight streamed through the lone window, casting pale streaks across the wooden floor, mocking her solitude. She sank to her knees, her fists clenched, nails biting into her palms as she fought the tears threatening to spill. The bond, faint but undeniable, pulsed in her chest, a lifeline she hadn't asked for and now couldn't escape. Riven had rejected her, severing the possibility of something she'd never dared to dream of. The humiliation, the pain, it was too much. She'd spent years feeling invisible, but this was a wound deeper than any she'd known, as if a piece of her soul had been torn away. A sharp knock at the door broke her spiraling thoughts. She wiped her tears hastily, rising to her feet. "Come in," she called, forcing her voice into a semblance of steadiness. The door creaked open, revealing Vera, the pack's healer. Her kind brown eyes scanned Kalia's face, taking in her tear-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. Vera stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her, her presence warm but tinged with concern. "I thought I might find you here," she said, her tone soft but firm. She crossed the room, her gray braids swaying, and placed a gentle hand on Kalia's arm. "You're not okay, are you?" Kalia looked away, ashamed of her vulnerability. "I'm fine," she murmured, though the lie felt hollow even to her. "No, you're not." Vera's voice was kind but unyielding. She guided Kalia to the edge of her bed, sitting beside her. "I heard what happened. Word travels fast in a pack, especially when it involves the alpha." Kalia winced, the sting of humiliation sharper now. Of course everyone would know by now. Her rejection, her shame, laid bare for the pack to whisper about. "It's not just the rejection," she admitted, her voice cracking. "It's everything. The bond, the pack, Riven. Why would fate tie me to him? I'm nothing to this pack." Vera's grip on her arm tightened, her eyes fierce. "Don't ever say that. You may not have a wolf, but you have a spirit stronger than most. The pack doesn't see it. They're too caught up in their own rules, their own expectations. But I see it, Kalia, and Riven saw it too, even if he's too stubborn to admit it." Kalia's head snapped up, her brow furrowing. "He made it perfectly clear he doesn't want me." "That doesn't mean he didn't feel the bond," Vera said softly, her voice steady. "Rejection isn't easy for either side, even an alpha. He's fighting his own battle, Kalia, but that's his burden, not yours." The words were meant to comfort, but they only deepened Kalia's confusion. Why reject her if the bond was as powerful as Vera claimed? Why walk away without giving it a chance? Before she could voice her questions, a low, eerie howl pierced the night, sending a shiver down her spine. Vera stiffened, her expression darkening. "The patrols," she murmured, rising to her feet. Another howl followed, louder, more urgent, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Kalia stood, her pulse quickening, the air suddenly heavy with dread. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Vera admitted, her eyes narrowing as she moved toward the door. "Stay here, Kalia. I'll find out." But Kalia's instincts screamed against staying behind. She wasn't a warrior, wasn't gifted with a wolf's strength or senses. But the bond, the faint, persistent hum in her chest, urged her to act. Something was wrong, something tied to Riven, to her, to the pack. Ignoring Vera's warning, she grabbed her jacket and followed the healer into the night, the chilling howls echoing in her ears, a promise of danger lurking just beyond the moonlight. The pack's main square was a storm of chaos, the air thick with the scent of fear and aggression. Wolves darted through the shadows, their growls and snarls blending into a cacophony that drowned out the distant hum of cicadas. The moonlight, once a gentle silver glow, now cast an eerie pall over the scene, illuminating the tension that hung like a shroud. Kalia pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding, her jacket clutched tightly against the chill of the night. Vera was ahead, her gray braids swinging as she moved toward the source of the disturbance. Kalia's eyes scanned the square, searching for Riven, but he was nowhere to be seen. The bond, faint and frayed from his rejection, pulsed weakly in her chest, urging her forward despite the dread curling in her stomach. A deep, guttural roar tore through the night, silencing the pack's murmurs. Every head turned toward the tree line, where a massive figure emerged, its white fur glowing unnaturally under the moonlight. The creature was no ordinary wolf. Its size dwarfed even the largest pack warriors, its muscles rippling with raw power. Its eyes burned a sickly red, glowing like embers, exuding a menace that made Kalia's breath hitch. The rogue's gaze swept over the gathered pack, predatory and deliberate, as if assessing its prey. Whispers rippled through the crowd, fearful, uncertain, until one word rose above the rest: rogue. "What is that?" Kalia whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes locked on the creature. Vera appeared at her side, her pale face, her gray braid narrowed with grim recognition. She said, her voice low, "A rogue, but not just any rogue. There's something wrong with it, something unnatural." The rogue's gaze landed on Kalia, and for a moment she felt pinned in place, as if it saw straight through her. A shiver ran down her spine, not fear exactly, but something deeper, more primal, like a thread of recognition tugging at her soul. The bond in her chest flared, sharp and insistent, and a horrifying realization crashed over her. Those red eyes, though twisted and unnatural, held a flicker of something familiar. Riven's piercing dark gaze, now corrupted by something dark and malevolent. "It's him," Kalia breathed, her voice trembling. Vera's eyes widened, her hand gripping Kalia's arm. "What are you talking about? That's impossible." "It's not," Kalia insisted, her pulse racing. "The eyes, the scent, it's him. He's cursed." Before Vera could respond, the rogue let out another roar, its muscles coiling as it prepared to charge. The pack sprang into action, forming a defensive line, their growls rising in unison. Warriors shifted, their forms blurring into sleek, powerful wolves, their claws digging into the earth. Kalia's heart pounded. She was no fighter, no match for a beast like this. But the bond screamed at her to act, to protect, to understand. Ignoring Vera's sharp protest, "Kalia, stay back!" She pushed forward, weaving through the crowd toward the chaos. The rogue lunged, its movements impossibly fast, crashing into the pack's front line with brutal force. Wolves scattered, some yelping in pain as its massive paws swiped through the air. Despite its ferocity, Kalia noticed something strange. It wasn't fighting to kill. Its strikes were calculated, defensive, as if holding back a deeper rage. The pack warriors, led by Ronan, a tall, green-eyed beta with a spear in hand, pressed forward, their snarls fierce, but their efforts futile against the rogue's unnatural strength. "Kalia, what are you doing?" Vera's voice was sharp as she caught up, grabbing Kalia's shoulder. "You can't be here. It's too dangerous." "I have to," Kalia said, her voice trembling but resolute. "He's not just a rogue. It's Riven. I know it." Vera's grip tightened, her eyes searching Kalia's face. "If you're right, this is worse than I thought. Stay out of the way. Let the warriors handle it." But Kalia couldn't stay back. The bond, though weakened by Riven's rejection, pulsed with a desperate urgency, pulling her toward the rogue. She broke free from Vera's grasp and darted toward the tree line, following the rogue as it retreated into the forest, the pack warriors in pursuit. The air grew heavier with each step, the scent of pine and damp earth mingling with the coppery tang of blood. Her boots crunched on fallen leaves, her breath shallow as she pushed deeper into the shadows, her heart hammering with a mix of fear and determination. A low growl stopped her in her tracks. In a small clearing, the rogue stood, its massive frame cutting a stark silhouette against the moonlight. Its red eyes locked onto her, its body tense, a deep rumbling emanating from its chest. Kalia froze, her breath catching, but she forced herself to meet its gaze. "Riven," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady. "It's me, Kalia." The rogue growled again, its muscles rippling, but there was a flicker in its eyes, something human, a spark of recognition struggling against the crimson haze. Kalia took a cautious step forward, her hands raised, palms open. "You know me," she said, softening. "You're not this beast. You're still in there." The growl deepened, and for a moment she thought it might attack, but the rogue hesitated, its massive frame shifting slightly, as if caught between instincts. Kalia seized the moment, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I know you didn't want this. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to help you. I promise." The rogue let out a sharp bark, not an attack, but a warning, as if urging her to stay back. Before she could speak again, the sound of crashing footsteps shattered the fragile tension. Pack warriors burst into the clearing, led by Ronan, his green eyes blazing with determination, his spear gleaming in the moonlight. "Get out of the way, Kalia," he shouted, raising his weapon. "That thing's dangerous." "No!" Kalia cried, stepping between the rogue and the warriors, her arms outstretched. "You can't kill him." Ronan's eyes narrowed, his grip on the spear unwavering. "He's a threat to the pack. You've seen what he's done. Move." "You don't understand." Kalia's voice rang out, stronger than she felt, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's cursed. It's Riven, our alpha. This isn't his fault." A murmur rippled through the warriors, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. "Cursed?" one echoed, his voice laced with skepticism. "What are you talking about?" Kalia took a shaky breath, her eyes flicking to the rogue, who stood motionless now, its red eyes watching her with an eerie intensity. "I don't know how or why, but it's him. I feel it. The bond. He's still in there. You have to give me a chance to save him." Roman's jaw tightened, his spear still raised, his gaze shifting between Kalia and the rogue. "He's a danger to us all. If you're wrong, this is on you." "I'm not wrong," Kalia said, firm despite the tremor in her hands. She turned back to the rogue, her heart racing. "Riven, please. You have to fight this." The rogue growled low, its stance shifting, and for a fleeting moment its eyes flickered, a hint of Riven's dark gaze breaking through the crimson. Then with a sudden bark, it turned and bolted into the shadows, its massive form vanishing as swiftly as it had appeared. "No!" Kalia's cry tore from her throat, her instincts urging her to follow, but Ronan grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. "Let him go," he said low but commanding. "We need to regroup. This isn't over." Kalia yanked her arm free, her eyes blazing. "You don't get it. He's our alpha. We can't just hunt him down like some animal." Ronan's expression softened, but only slightly. "If he's really Riven, then we'll find a way. But right now, we need a plan, not reckless heroics." Kalia's chest heaved, her emotions a storm of fear, frustration, and determination. The bond pulsed faintly, a reminder of the connection she couldn't ignore even after his rejection. The rogue wasn't just a threat. It was Riven, trapped by a curse she didn't understand. As the warriors moved back to the pack's lodge, Kalia lingered, her eyes fixed on the dark forest where Riven had vanished. The truth was clear. He wasn't the only one in danger. The entire pack was at risk, and she was the only one who saw it. Whatever this curse was, it was tied to her, to the bond, to the night that had changed everything, and she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the truth. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, the moonlight barely penetrating the dense canopy as Kalia made her way toward the witch's den. Her heart pounded, each step driven by a mix of desperation and dread. The events of the night, the rogue's attack, the realization that it was Riven, cursed and transformed, clung to her like damp earth. The bond, though strained by his rejection, pulsed faintly in her chest, urging her forward. Vera had tried to dissuade her, warning that Erin, the pack's reclusive witch, was not to be trusted. But Kalia had no choice. If anyone knew how to break the curse, it was Erin. The air grew thicker as she approached, heavy with the scent of moss and something sharper, like burning herbs. The faint sound of running water echoed in the distance, mingling with the rustle of leaves, creating an eerie symphony that set her nerves on edge. Kalia paused before the entrance to Erin's den, a cave carved into the side of a rocky outcrop, its mouth shrouded in vines. Her fingers brushed the pendant around her neck, a small silver crescent moon, a gift from her mother, now her only source of comfort. Vera's voice echoed in her mind. "Are you sure about this?" Kalia wasn't sure. Not really. But the image of Riven's red eyes, glowing with unnatural fury, left her no alternative. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and pushed aside the vines, stepping into the darkness. The cave was dimly lit, the flickering glow of candles casting dancing shadows across the walls. Shelves lined with jars of strange substances, glowing liquids, dried herbs, and what looked like bones gave the place an otherworldly feel. The air was thick with the scent of sage and something metallic, making Kalia's skin prickle. From the shadows, a figure emerged, cloaked in black, her silver hair glowing faintly in the candlelight. Erin, the witch, regarded Kalia with sharp, violet eyes, a faint smile curling her lips. "You're bold to come here, child," she said, her voice smooth and honeyed, carrying an edge that made Kalia's stomach twist. "What do you seek?" Kalia's throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I need to know about a curse. A wolf, an alpha, has been transformed. He's not himself. I think someone did this to him." The cave seemed to close in around Kalia, the air heavier, suffocating. She stared at the vial, its shimmering contents both a promise and a threat. What would the magic take? Her connection to Riven, her place in the pack, something deeper, something she hadn't yet grasped? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but the memory of Riven's transformed form, his red eyes, his desperate growls pushed her forward. She wasn't just doing this for herself or for him. It was for the pack, for the fragile balance that held them together. Tucking the vial into her jacket, she turned and left the cave, the witch's warning ringing in her ears. The journey back to the pack's lodge was a blur, the forest silence broken only by the crunch of her boots and the distant howls of the patrols. The vial felt like a lead weight in her pocket, a constant reminder of the choice she'd made. As she neared the lodge, raised voices cut through the night, sharp with tension. She quickened her pace, emerging into the main square where the pack was gathered in a tense circle. Ronan, the beta, stood at the center, his green eyes blazing, his spear in hand. "We've waited long enough," he was saying, his voice cold. "If we don't act now, that row will tear us apart." Kalia's heart raced as she pushed through the crowd, clutching the vial tightly. "You can't," she called, her voice cutting through the murmurs. All eyes turned to her, some skeptical, others hostile. She held up the vial, its shimmering glow catching the moonlight. "I have a way to break the curse, but you have to trust me." Ronan's gaze flicked to the vial, his expression unreadable. "And what's that supposed to do?" "It'll save him," Kalia said, her voice steady despite the weight of their scrutiny. "It's Riven, our alpha. He's not lost, not yet. Give me a chance." The crowd erupted in whispers, doubt rippling through them. Ronan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing.
You're asking us to risk the pack for a hunch. If you're wrong, Kalia, we all pay the price." "I'm not wrong," she said, meeting his gaze, her resolve hardening. "I'll prove it. Just give me until midnight." Ronan's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his voice low. "You have until then. Don't make us regret this." Kalia's grip on the vial tightened, the witch's warning echoing in her mind. The magic will claim its price. Whatever it took, she would face it. For Riven, for the pack, for the bond that refused to let her go.
The forest was a cathedral of shadows, the full moon hanging heavy in the sky, its silver light slicing through the tangled branches. Kalia stood at the edge of the clearing where she'd last seen the rogue, her heart hammering against her ribs. The vial of silver liquid, given to her by the witch Erin, felt like a burning coal in her pocket, its weight a constant reminder of the price she'd agreed to pay. The pack's lodge was a distant glow behind her, the murmurs of the gathered warriors fading into the night's eerie quiet. Ronan had given her until midnight, but the moon was merely at its peak, and time was slipping away. The bond, faint and frayed from Riven's rejection, pulsed weakly in her chest, guiding her to this place, to him. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, tinged with something sharper, blood and fear. Kalia's breath caught as a low growl rumbled from the shadows, and the rogue emerged, its massive white-furred form cutting a stark figure against the darkness. Its red eyes glowed like embers, locking onto her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But beneath the feral menace, she saw it again, the flicker of Riven's dark gaze trapped within the curse's grip. Her fingers tightened around the vial, her resolution hardening despite the fear clawing at her insides. "Kalia," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady. "It's me, Kalia." The rogue's growl deepened, its muscles tensing as it took a step closer, its massive paws sinking into the soft earth. Kalia forced herself to stand her ground, her eyes never leaving its crimson stare. "You know me," she said, her voice softening, pleading. "I know you're still in there. This," she raised the vial, its silver content shimmering in the moonlight, catching the rogue's attention. "This will help you. Please, let me help you." For a moment, the rogue stilled, its heavy breaths fogging the cool night air. The tension in its posture eased slightly, the growls subsiding into ragged, uneven breaths. Kalia's heart raced. There was a chance, a slim thread of hope that Riven was fighting to reach her. But then, something shifted. The red in its eyes flared brighter, a snarl ripping from its throat as it coiled, ready to charge. Kalia's breath hitched, her instincts screaming to run, but she held firm, clutching the vial like a lifeline. "Riven, stop!" she cried, desperation lacing her voice. "This isn't you!" The rogue lunged, its speed terrifying, a blur of white fur and flashing claws. Kalia dropped to the ground, rolling out of the way as its massive form tore through the air where she'd stood. Her heart pounded as she scrambled to her feet, the vial still clutched tightly in her hand. The rogue circled her, its growls low and menacing, the beast fully in control. Kalia's mind raced. She needed to get close enough to use the vial, but how? It was too fast, too strong, driven by instincts she could no hope to match. Then, an idea struck her, born of desperation and the faint pull of the bond. She lowered herself to the ground, bowing her head, baring her neck in a gesture of submission, a sign no wolf could ignore. "I'm not your enemy," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I'm your mate." The rogue froze, its growls fading into silence, its red eyes narrowed, steadying her with a mix of wariness and something else, recognition. Kalia's heart thundered as it approached, its massive form looming over her. She held her breath, praying the bond was enough to reach him. When it was close enough, she moved in one swift motion, uncorking the vial and flinging its contents over the rogue. The silver liquid shimmered as it hit its fur, spreading like wildfire, sinking into its pelt with an eerie glow. The rogue let out a guttural roar, its body convulsing as the magic took hold. Kalia stumbled backward, her eyes wide as its form began to change. The white fur receded, its massive frame shrinking, limbs twisting and reforming. The red glow in its eyes dimmed, replaced by the familiar dark gaze she'd known before. Within moments, Riven knelt before her, human again, his chest heaving, his body slick with sweat and blood. His dark hair clung to his forehead, his scar stark against his pale skin, his expression a mix of confusion and pain. "Kalia," he rasped, his voice hoarse, barely audible. He reached out, his hand trembling, as if to confirm she was real. Before she could respond, a searing pain tore through her chest, sharp and unrelenting, as if her heart were being ripped apart. She gasped, clutching at her chest, her vision blurring as the magic claimed its price. Aaron's warning echoed in her mind. The magic will take what you hold most dear. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground, the world tilting around her. The last thing she saw was Riven's horrified face, his hands reaching for her as darkness swallowed her whole. The void was suffocating, a blanket of nothingness that pressed against her senses. Whispers swirled around her, faint and intelligible, carrying a weight of sorrow and loss. Her chest burned, the pain radiating outward, as if something vital were being torn away. "Khalif." A voice, Riven's, soft and panicked, cut through the haze, pulling her back. Her eyes fluttered open, the cold, damp earth beneath her fingers grounding her. Riven's face hovered above her, his dark eyes wide with concern, the red glow gone, replaced by a clarity she hadn't seen in him before. "You're alive," he said, his voice shaking, his hands steadying her shoulders. "You scared the hell out of me." Kalia tried to sit up, but a wave of pain made her gasp, her body protesting the movement. Riven's hands tightened, keeping her still. "Easy," he said. "You need to rest." She shook her head, ignoring the ache that radiated through her skull. "The magic, what did it do?" Her voice trembled, the weight of Aaron's warnings settling over her like a shroud. Riven's jaw tightened, his gaze darkening as he looked away. "You collapsed. It was like something was being taken from you. I tried to wake you, but you were unresponsive." "What about you?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Are you back?" He nodded, though his eyes remained shadowed. "I'm here. The curse, it's gone." His voice was low, heavy with an emotion she couldn't name. Relief flooded through her, but it was fleeting. The emptiness in her chest grew, a hollow ache that felt like a piece of her soul had been carved away. She pressed a hand to her heart, her breath uneven. "What did it take from me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Riven didn't answer, his expression unreadable. Instead, he helped her to her feet, his movements careful, as if she might shatter. "We should get back to the pack. They need to know you succeeded." The walk back to the lodge was silent, save for the crunch of leaves beneath their boots. Kalia's thoughts churned, her body heavy with exhaustion. She felt different, as if the magic had left a void where something vital once resided. The bond, though still present, felt weaker, like a thread stretched too thin. As they emerged from the forest, the pack was waiting, their faces a mix of relief and awe as they saw Riven, human and whole. A chorus of gasps rippled through the crowd, the tension dissipating like fog in the morning sun. "Alpha," Ronan said, stepping forward, his green eyes hesitant, his usual confidence subdued. "You're back." Riven nodded, his expression stoic. "Thanks to Kalia." All eyes turned to her, and for the first time, their scrutiny didn't crush her. She stood taller, meeting their gazes, but the emptiness within her grew, a nagging sensation that something was wrong. Riven's hand lingered on her arm, a silent reassurance, but it wasn't enough to fill the void. "We're not done," he said quietly, his voice firm. "The curse is broken, but we need to find out who did this and why." Kalia nodded, her resolve hardening despite the ache in her chest. The magic had saved Riven, but at what cost? As the pack murmured their gratitude, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true price was yet to be revealed, and the shadow of the curse still loomed over them all. The pack's lodge buzzed with a fragile joy, the air thick with the scent of pine and roasted meat as the pack celebrated Riven's return. Torches cast a warm glow over the main hall, their flickering light dancing across the wooden beams, but the warmth did little to chase away the chill that had settled in Kalia's bones. She stood at the edge of the gathering, her blue dress now crumpled from the night's ordeal, her fingers twisting the fabric as she watched the pack revel in their alpha's restoration. Wolves laughed, their voices loud with relief, toasting Riven with mugs of ale, their eyes no longer shadowed by fear. Yet Kalia felt like a ghost among them, the void in her chest growing with every passing moment, a hollow ache where the bond with Riven once thrummed, now reduced to a faint whisper. Riven stood at the center of the hall, his broad shoulders filling the space, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with the quiet authority of an alpha reclaimed. The scar above his brow caught the torchlight, a stark reminder of his battles, both past and recent. He accepted the pack's gratitude with measured nods, his expression composed, but Kalia saw the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze flickered to her, brief but heavy with unspoken words. The bond, once a vibrant thread tying their souls, now felt like a fraying rope, stretched too thin by the magic that had saved him. Irene's warning echoed in her mind. The magic will take what you hold most dear. Was this the price, the bond itself, the one thing she hadn't dared to fully embrace? She slipped out of the hall, needing air, needing space to breathe away from the pack's watchful eyes. The night was cool, the full moon still high, casting silver light over the lodge's wooden exterior. Kalia leaned against the wall, her breath shallow, her hand pressed to her chest as if she could will the bond back to life. The emptiness was unbearable, a gnawing absence that left her feeling unmoored, as if a piece of her soul had been carved away in the clearing. She closed her eyes, trying to summon the memory of Riven's human gaze, the fleeting moment when he'd looked at her with recognition. But the image was overshadowed by the rogue's red eyes, the curse's cruel grip. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her, and she opened her eyes to find Riven approaching, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. His dark hair was still damp with sweat, his shirt torn from the battle, revealing glimpses of the scars that marked his chest. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice low, carrying the same commanding edge that had silenced the hall earlier. "I needed air," Kalia replied, her voice quieter than she intended. She met his gaze, searching for the bond, for the connection that had once sparked between them. But it was faint, like a distant star obscured by clouds. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her words barely above a whisper. "The bond, it's not the same." Riven's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening as he stepped closer. "I thought it was just me," he admitted, his voice heavy with something like regret. "It's weaker, like it's slipping away." Kalia's chest tightened, the confirmation of her fears hitting like a blow. "The magic," she said, her voice trembling. "Aaron said it would take what I valued most. What if it took us?" Riven's expression flickered,
a mix of frustration and something softer, more vulnerable. I rejected you, Kalia. I thought I was protecting the pack, but maybe I made it easier for the magic to unravel what we had. He looked away, his hands clenching into fists. I don't know what this means for us. The words cut deeper than his rejection in the clearing, the uncertainty a fresh wound. Kalia wanted to scream, to demand answers from fate itself, but the weight of the pack's celebration pressed around them, a reminder that their personal loss was overshadowed by the greater victory. She opened her mouth to respond, but a low, bone-chilling growl cut through the night, freezing her in place. Riven's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing, ready to shift. The growl came again, closer now, from the tree line beyond the lodge. The pack's laughter faltered inside, replaced by murmurs of unease. Kalia's heart raced as she followed Riven's gaze, her eyes straining to pierce the shadows. A pair of glowing yellow eyes emerged, sharp and unnatural, belonging to a wolf unlike she'd seen before. Its fur was a mottled gray, its movements jerky as if controlled by an unseen force. It stood at the edge of the square, its gaze locked on Kalia, its presence radiating a malice that made her blood run cold. "What the hell is that?" Riven muttered, stepping in front of her, his stance protective. Kalia's breath hitched, the bond flaring briefly, sharp with warning. "It's here for me," she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't know how she knew, but the wolf's yellow eyes seemed to see through her, as if drawn to the void left by the magic's price.
Before Riven could respond, the wolf let out a howl that reverberated through the square, sending a shiver down Kalia's spine. The pack poured out of the lodge, warriors shifting into their wolf forms, their growls rising in unison. Ronan appeared, his green eyes blazing, his spear already in hand. "Another rogue?" he growled, glancing at Riven. "This isn't over, is it?" "No," Riven said, his voice low and dangerous. "Stay back, Kalia." But Kalia couldn't move, her eyes locked on the rogue. Its gaze held a twisted curiosity, as if it knew her, as if it sensed the emptiness within her. The bond flickered, a faint pulse that felt wrong, tainted. "It's connected to the curse," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not finished with us." The rogue took a step forward, its movements erratic, its lips curling back to reveal razor-sharp teeth. The pack warriors formed a defensive line, but Kalia felt the weight of its attention, a pull that made her stomach twist. "Riven," she said, her voice urgent, "it's not like the others. It's targeting me." Riven's eyes flashed with a mix of fear and determination. "Get behind me," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. But before she could move, the rogue lunged, not at the warriors, but straight for her. Kalia stumbled back, her heart pounding, as Riven intercepted, his body shifting mid-motion into his wolf form, a massive black beast with amber eyes. The two wolves collided, a blur of fur and claws, their snarls echoing through the square. Kalia's hands trembled as she watched, the bond pulsing erratically, as if trying to reconnect, but faltering under the rogue's presence. Rowan grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Stay out of this," he barked, but Kalia yanked free, her eyes fixed on the fight. Riven was strong, but the rogue's movements were unnatural, its yellow eyes glowing brighter with each strike. It wasn't just fighting, it was toying with him, its attacks precise, as if testing his limits. Kalia's mind raced, Aaron's warning resurfacing. The magic will claim its price. Was this rogue a manifestation of that price, drawn to the void left in her soul? She clutched her pendant, her only anchor, and took a step forward, ignoring Ronan's shout. "Stop!" she cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. The rogue paused, its head snapping toward her, its yellow eyes narrowing. Riven used the moment to break free, retreating to her side, his wolf form battered but unyielding. The rogue didn't pursue. It stood still, its gaze locked on Kalia, a low growl rumbling from its chest. "It knows me," Kalia whispered, her voice trembling. "It's here because of what I did." Before Riven could respond, the rogue turned and vanished into the shadows, its departure as sudden as its arrival. The pack stood frozen, their breaths heavy in the silence. Riven shifted back, his human form bloodied, his eyes locked on Kalia. "We need to find out what's going on," he said, his voice low, urgent. "This isn't over." Kalia nodded, the emptiness in her chest heavier now. The rogue's yellow eyes burned into her memory. The curse's effects lingered, tied to her, to the bond, to the price she'd paid. As the pack regrouped, their relief tainted by fear, Kalia knew one thing with chilling certainty. The rogue wasn't just a threat, it was a message, and she was at its heart.
The northern woods loomed like a fortress of shadows, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky, blotting out the moon's silver light. Kalia's breath fogged in the chilly air as she trudged behind Riven, Vera, and a small team of pack warriors. Ronan and two others, Leela and Torin, their faces set with grim determination. The memory of the yellow-eyed rogue lingered, its eerie focus on Kalia a weight that pressed against her chest. The bond, already frayed from the ritual that saved Riven, flickered faintly, a distant pulse that felt more like a warning than a connection. The pack's celebration had been short-lived, replaced by a tense urgency to uncover the curse's source. Riven had insisted on investigating the cursed clearing Vera mentioned, a place in the northern woods where the air itself felt wrong, heavy with a darkness that had haunted pack legends for generations. Kalia's boots sunk into the damp earth, the scent of moss and decay thick in her nostrils. Her hand brushed the pendant at her neck, the silver crescent moon a small comfort against the unease that coiled in her gut. Vera walked beside her, her gray braids swinging, her brown eyes scanning the trees with a healer's caution. "Stay close," she murmured, her voice low. "This place, it's not right." Riven led the way, his broad shoulders cutting a path through the underbrush, his dark hair catching the occasional sliver of moonlight. His movements were deliberate, his senses alert, but Kalia noticed the tension in his posture, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. The curse had left its mark on him, even if he was human again. "We're close," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of command. "Keep your eyes open." The team moved in silence, the only sounds the crunch of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As they approached the clearing, the air grew heavier, oppressive, like a storm waiting to break. Kalia's skin prickled, a chill running down her spine as they stepped into the open space. At the center stood a twisted tree, its gnarled branches reaching skyward like skeletal fingers, its bark blackened and pulsing with an unnatural energy. The ground around it was barren, the grass withered to ash, as if the tree itself drained the life from the earth. Kalia's breath caught, the bond flaring briefly, sharp with warning. "This is it," Vera said, her voice hushed, almost reverent. "The heart of the curse." Riven's eyes narrowed as he approached the tree, his hand hovering near the dagger at his belt. "It's alive," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "I can feel it." Kalia stepped closer, drawn to the tree despite the dread curling in her stomach. The air around it hummed, a low vibration that seemed to seep into her bones. She reached out,
her fingers inches from the bark, when a sudden jolt of energy surged through her, sharp and searing. She gasped, stumbling back, her vision blurring as the world tilted. A vision swallowed her whole. She stood in the same clearing, but it was different. Vibrant, alive, the tree healthy and green, its branches swaying in a gentle breeze. A cloaked figure stood before it, their face obscured, their hands raised as they chanted in a language Kalia didn't recognize. Dark energy swirled around them, twisting into the tree, its leaves wilting as the bark blackened. The figure turned, their hood falling back just enough to reveal piercing eyes glowing with malice. "The key," they hissed, their voice a venomous whisper that seemed to pierce Kalia's soul.
"You are the key. Kalia!" Riven's voice snapped her back to reality, his hands gripping her shoulders, steadying her as she swayed. Her chest heaved, her heart racing as the vision's echo lingered. "What happened?" he demanded, his dark eyes searching hers, filled with a mix of concern and urgency. "I saw," Kalia's voice trembled, her hand pressing to her chest where the bond flickered erratically. "A figure. They cursed the tree. They called me the key." Vera's eyes widened, her face paling. "The key? Kalia, what did they look like?" "I couldn't see their face," Kalia said, her voice shaking, "but they were powerful. The curse, it started here with them." Before anyone could respond, a low growl rumbled through the clearing, followed by another, then another. The team tensed, weapons drawn, as three rogues emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing yellow, their movements jerky and unnatural, just like the one that had targeted Kalia. Their fur was mottled, their forms lean but menacing, their gazes fixed on the group with predatory focus. "Stay together," Riven barked, his body shifting into his wolf form in a blur of black fur and amber eyes. Ronan raised his spear, Lila and Torin flanking him, their own forms shifting into sleek gray wolves. Vera pulled Kalia behind her, her hands glowing faintly with healer's magic, ready to defend. The rogues attacked, their movements erratic but deadly, their claws slashing through the air. Riven met one head-on, his massive form colliding with it in a flurry of snarls and snapping jaws. Ronan thrust his spear, catching another in the shoulder, but the rogue barely flinched, its yellow eyes glowing brighter as it lunged again. Kalia's heart pounded, her lack of a wolf leaving her vulnerable, but she couldn't stand idly by. She scanned the clearing, her eyes drawn back to the tree, its dark energy pulsing in time with the rogues' attacks, as if feeding their frenzy. "Kalia, stay back!" Vera shouted, her hands weaving a protective barrier of light as a rogue swiped at them. But Kalia's instincts screamed otherwise. The tree was the key. She felt it, just as the vision had called her the key. Ignoring Vera's warning, she darted toward the tree, her hand outstretched, driven by a desperate need to understand. The moment her fingers brushed the bark, another jolt surged through her, stronger this time, pulling her back into the vision. The cloaked figure stood before her, their eyes boring into hers. "You cannot stop it," they hissed, their voice a venomous echo. "The curse is yours now, Key. It flows through you." The tree pulsed, its dark energy wrapping around her like chains, and Kalia felt the void in her chest, the one left by the ritual's price, expand, as if the curse were sinking deeper into her soul. She snapped back to the clearing, gasping, her hand jerking away from the tree. The battle raged around her, Riven and the warriors holding their own, but barely, the rogues relentless in their assault. "The tree!" Kalia shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Riven's amber eyes flicked to her, understanding dawning. He let out a fierce growl, breaking away from his opponent and charging toward the tree. But before he could reach it, a rogue leaped, its claws grazing his side, drawing a spray of blood. Riven snarled, twisting to counter, but the distraction gave another rogue an opening, its jaws snapping inches from Kalia's arm.
Vera's barrier flared, knocking the rogue back, but the effort left her trembling. "We can't hold them," she shouted. "We need to retreat." "No," Kalia cried, her eyes locked on the tree. "If we destroy it, we stop them." Ronan's spear flew, pinning a rogue to the ground. But more eyes glowed in the shadows. More were coming. "Kalia's right," he yelled, his voice strained. "The tree's the source." Riven shifted back to human form, blood dripping from his side, his eyes blazing with determination. "Kalia, get out of here," he ordered, but she shook her head, her resolve hardening. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. She reached for the tree again, ignoring the pain as its energy surged through her. The bond flared, weak but defiant, connecting her to Riven, to the pack, to the curse itself. She didn't know how, but she felt it. The tree's power was tied to her, to the price she had paid, to the void within her. The rogues howled, their attacks intensifying as if sensing her intent. Riven and the warriors fought to keep them at bay, their movements desperate. Kalia pressed her hand harder against the bark, willing the energy to bend, to break. A scream tore from her throat as the dark magic lashed back, but she held on. The vision's words echoing, "You are the key." A crack split the air, the tree shuddering as its energy faltered. The rogues froze, their yellow eyes dimming, then scattered into the shadows, their howls fading. Kalia collapsed, her breath ragged, her body trembling from the effort. Riven was at her side in an instant, his hands steadying her, his face pale with worry. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I don't know," Kalia gasped, her eyes fixed on the tree, its pulsing energy now faint but not gone. "It's not over. The curse, it's still here." Vera knelt beside her, her hands glowing as she checked Kalia's vitals. "We need to get back to the lodge," she said, her voice urgent. "This place is too dangerous." Riven nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Let's move." As the team retreated, Kalia glanced back at the tree, its dark presence a silent promise of more to come. The vision's words haunted her. The key. The curse wasn't just about Riven or the pack. It was about her, and the void within her was only the beginning. The air in the northern woods was thick with menace, the cursed clearing's oppressive energy lingering like a bruise on the night. Kalia's body ached from her contact with the twisted tree, her hands still tingling where it had touched the blackened bark. The team, Riven, Vera, Ronan, Lilla, and Tauren, moved cautiously, their breaths visible in the chilly air, their eyes scanning the shadows for the rogues that had fled only moments ago. The faint pulse of the bond in Kalia's chest was erratic, a fragile thread strained by the curse's dark magic. The vision she'd experienced, the cloaked figure calling her the key, clung to her thoughts, its weight heavier than the damp earth beneath her boots. She clutched her pendant, the silver crescent moon, a small anchor against the chaos threatening to unravel her. Riven walked ahead, his black wolf form now human again, his broad shoulders tense, blood staining his torn shirt from the rogue's attack. His dark eyes flicked back to her, filled with a mix of concern and determination, but the bond between them felt like a fading echo, weakened by the ritual's price and the tree's dark pull. Vera stayed close to Kalia, her healer's senses alert, her gray braids swinging as she murmured protective incantations under her breath. Ronan, spear in hand, flanked the group with Leela and Torin, their wolf forms poised for action, their growls low and wary. The clearing was behind them, but its influence lingered, the air heavy with a hum that set Kalia's teeth on edge. She opened her mouth to speak, to warn Riven about the vision's words, when a sharp pain lanced through her skull, sudden and searing. She gasped, stumbling, her vision blurring as the world tilted. Riven's shout, "Kalia!" was distant, swallowed by a rush of darkness that pulled her under. She found herself standing in a realm of mist and shadow, the ground beneath her feet soft and insubstantial, like walking on clouds. The air shimmered with a faint golden light, and before her stood a figure, neither human nor wolf, but something ancient, its form fluid, shifting between shapes. A wolf with glowing eyes, a human with flowing robes, a tree with branches that reached for the sky. Its presence was overwhelming, a weight that pressed against her soul, yet it carried a strange warmth, like a hearth fire in a storm. "Who are you?" Kalia whispered, her voice trembling, her hand clutching her pendant. "I am the guardian," the entity said, its voice a chorus of whispers, both gentle and commanding. "I am the spirit of the pack's heart, bound to its magic, its strength, its legacy." Kalia's heart raced, the vision's clarity sharpening despite the surreal surroundings. "The tree, the curse, you're connected to it, aren't you?" The guardian's form shimmered, settling into a wolf-like shape, its eyes glowing a soft silver. "The tree was once a beacon of our power, a conduit for the pack's unity, but it was corrupted, twisted by one who sought to break what binds you. The curse flows from that betrayal, a poison that festers in the pack's soul." "Who did this?" Kalia asked, her voice urgent. "Why am I the key?" The guardian's eyes narrowed, its form rippling. "You are the key because you are the anomaly, the wolfless yet chosen by fate. The curse feeds on the bond, the secret tie that holds the pack together. Your connection to the alpha, though rejected, is its anchor." Kalia's breath caught, the bond flickering in her chest, a faint pulse of warmth amidst the void. "Riven, the bond, what does it want with us?" "To unravel you," the guardian said, its voice heavy with sorrow. "The curse seeks to sever what makes the pack whole. To stop it, you must make a choice that will either save your pack or doom it." "What choice?" Kalia's voice trembled, dread pooling in her stomach. The guardian's form shifted, becoming human-like, its eyes piercing. "You must sever the bond with your mate, fully and irrevocably. Only then can the curse's hold be broken. But beware, the bond is the pack's strength. Sever it, and you risk shattering what holds you together."
Kalia's heart pounded, the weight of the choice crushing her. Sever the bond? The one thing that, despite Riven's rejection, had given her purpose? A reason to fight? "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Then the curse will consume him," the guardian said, its voice a low, mournful echo. "And through him the pack, you, the key, will bear its weight." The mist around her thickened, the guardian's form fading, but its final words lingered. "Choose wisely, Kalia Eldrin. The pack's fate rests with you." A sharp jolt pulled her back to the forest, the cold, damp air flooding her lungs as she gasped. She was on her knees, Riven's hands gripping her shoulders, his dark eyes wide with panic. "Kalia, what happened?" he demanded, his voice rough. "You went pale, like you were somewhere else." The team surrounded her, their faces tense, weapons drawn. Vera knelt beside her, her hands glowing faintly as she checked Kalia's pulse. "Another vision?" she asked, her brown eyes sharp with concern. Kalia nodded, her throat tight, the Guardian's words echoing in her mind. "The curse. It's tied to the pack's magic, to our bond." She met Riven's gaze, the bond flickering between them, weak but undeniable. "It said I have to sever it completely." Riven's jaw tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Sever it? After everything you've done to save me?" Before Kalia could respond, a chorus of growls erupted from the shadows, chilling and guttural. Yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, more rogues than before, their forms lean and erratic, their movements driven by the same unnatural force. The team formed a tight circle, Riven pulling Kalia to her feet, his hand lingering on her arm. "We're surrounded," he said, his voice low, urgent. Ronan's spear gleamed in the moonlight, his green eyes blazing. He said, "We can't fight them all. We need to get back to the lodge." "No," Kalia said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her. "The curse is here. We have to face it." Lila and Torin growled, their wolf forms bristling, but the rogues didn't attack. Not yet. Their yellow eyes were fixed on Kalia, their growls a low, menacing hum that seemed to resonate with the tree's dark energy. "They're after me," she whispered, her heart racing. "The Guardian called me the key, the curse. It's using me." Riven's grip tightened, his eyes flashing with defiance. "They're not touching you," he said, his voice a low growl. "We fight together." Vera's hands glowed brighter, her barrier forming a faint shield around them. "We can't hold them off forever," she warned. "Kalia, what did the Guardian say? Is there a way to stop them?" Kalia's mind raced, the Guardian's words a tangled knot. Sever the bond, or let the curse consume Riven and the pack. But how could she choose when the bond, even weakened, was the only thing tying her to him? "I don't know," she admitted, her voice shaking. "It said the bond is the pack's strength, but also its weakness. If I sever it, then we lose everything," Riven finished, his voice heavy. He turned to face the rogues, his body tensing, ready to shift. "We're not giving up. Not yet." The rogues lunged, their movements a blur of claws and teeth. Riven shifted, his black wolf form meeting the first rogue head-on, their collision shaking the earth. Ronan's spear flashed, Leela and Torin diving into the fray, their snarls echoing through the clearing. Vera's barrier flickered, her strength waning as she shielded Kalia. "You need to decide," Vera shouted, her voice strained. "If you're the key, you're our only chance." Kalia's eyes darted to the tree, its dark pulse weaker but still alive, a heartbeat of malice that fueled the rogues. The bond flickered, a faint warmth in her chest urging her to act. But the Guardian's warning held her back. Sever the bond and risk the pack's unity. Let it remain and risk its destruction. The rogues pressed closer, their yellow eyes glowing with hunger. And Kalia realized there was no clear path forward, only a choice that would change everything. The cursed clearing pulsed with a malevolent energy, the twisted tree at its heart radiating a low hum that seemed to vibrate in Kalia's bones. The air was thick, oppressive, the moonlight barely piercing the dense canopy above. The team, Riven, Vera, Ronan, Leela, and Torin, stood in a defensive circle, battered and breathless from the rogue attack, their eyes locked on the glowing yellow eyes circling them in the shadows. Kalia's heart pounded, the bond with Riven flickering like a dying ember,
weakened by the ritual's price and the guardian's cryptic warning. Her hand gripped her pendant, the silver crescent moon warm against her skin, a fragile anchor against the chaos threatening to consume them. The guardian's words echoed in her mind, sever the bond or let the curse consume the pack. But the choice felt impossible, a trap with no right answer. A new growl, deeper and more resonant than the others, rumbled through the clearing, silencing the rogue's snarls. The yellow eyes in the shadows stilled, retreating slightly, as if deferring to a greater presence. Kalia's breath caught as a massive black wolf emerged from the darkness, its fur absorbing the moonlight, its eyes a piercing green that glowed with an unnatural intensity. It was larger than any rogue, larger even than Riven's wolf form, its presence radiating a primal power that made the air heavier, the ground itself seeming to tremble beneath its paws. The team froze, weapons raised, but the wolf's gaze was fixed on Kalia, its eyes boring into her with a chilling intelligence. Kalia Eldrin, its voice a deep, guttural rasp that echoed unnaturally, as if spoken by a human mind through a beast's throat. The key. Riven stepped in front of her, his body tense, his dark eyes flashing with defiance. "Stay back," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, his hands poised to shift. "What are you?" The black wolf's lips curled into a semblance of a smile, its green eyes gleaming. "I am the curse's heart, born of betrayal, fed by your pack's weakness. And she?" Its gaze shifted back to Kalia, pinning her in place. "She is the key to its end, or its triumph." Kalia's heart raced, the bond flickering erratically, a faint pulse of warmth drowned by the void left by the ritual's price. "What do you want with me?" she asked, her voice trembling but steady, her hand tightening around her pendant.
The wolf paced slowly, its movements deliberate, predatory. "You carry the curse now," it said. "The magic you used to save him." It nodded toward Riven, its eyes narrowing. "It bound you to me. Sever the bond, and you unleash chaos greater than you can imagine. Keep it, and you doom your pack to my mercy." Riven's jaw tightened, his body shifting into his black wolf form in a blur of motion, his amber eyes blazing. "You're not touching her," he snarled, his voice a deep growl that reverberated through the clearing. The black wolf laughed, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down Kalia's spine. Brave but futile alpha. It lunged without warning, its speed blinding, its massive form crashing into Riven with a force that shook the earth. The two wolves tumbled across the clearing, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, their snarls echoing through the trees. Riven fought fiercely, his strength formidable, but the black wolf was relentless, its movements precise, almost effortless, as if toying with him. "Kalia, get back!" Vera shouted, her hands glowing as she wove a protective barrier, but it flickered, her strength waning from the earlier fight. Ronan thrust his spear, aiming for the black wolf, but it dodged with unnatural agility, its green eyes flicking to him with disdain before returning to Riven. Leela and Torin joined the fray, their gray wolf forms diving at the black wolf, but it swatted them aside with a single swipe, sending them crashing into the underbrush. Kalia's heart pounded, her eyes darted to the twisted tree, its dark energy pulsing in time with the black wolf's movements, as if fueling its power. The guardian's words and the black wolf's warning collided in her mind. Sever the bond, or let the curse consume them. But what if the wolf was right? What if breaking the bond unleashed something worse? Driven by instinct, Kalia ran toward the tree, ignoring Vera's cry of protest. The bond, weak as it was, urged her forward, a desperate need to understand the curse's hold. Her hand brushed the blackened bark, and a surge of energy tore through her, sharp and searing, pulling her into another vision. The clearing was different, vibrant, alive, the tree green and thriving. The cloaked figure from her earlier vision stood before it, their hands raised, dark magic swirling around them. "The key will undo it," they hissed, their voice a venomous echo.
The vision shifted, and Kalia saw herself standing in the clearing, the bond a glowing thread between her and Riven. As she reached for it, the thread snapped, and a wave of chaos erupted, shadows spilling from the tree, consuming the pack. She gasped, the vision releasing her, and found herself back in the clearing, her hand still on the tree, the black wolf's green eyes locked on her. "You see now?" it said, its voice cutting through the chaos of the battle. Riven lay panting, bloodied but unyielding, his amber eyes fixed at the wolf. "Sever the bond, and you unleash me fully. Keep it, and I will tear your pack apart, piece by piece." Kalia's chest heaved, the bond flickering, a faint warmth that felt like both a lifeline and a chain. "Why me?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What am I to you?" "You are the anomaly, the wolfless, yet chosen. The curse flows through you now, amplified by your sacrifice. Choose, Key, or all you love will burn."
Riven shifted back to human form, staggering to his feet, blood dripping from a gash on his arm. "Kalia, don't listen to it," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "We'll find another way." But the black wolf's words sank deep, twisting around her heart. The tree's energy pulsed under her hand, amplifying the void within her. The curse's presence, a living thing that seemed to whisper her name. She wanted to believe Riven, to trust in their bond, but the wolf's warning echoed the guardians. Sever the bond or doom the pack. The choice was hers, but the cost was unimaginable. The black wolf lunged again, this time at Kalia, its claws gleaming in the moonlight. Riven tackled it, his strength faltering but his resolve unbroken. Vera's barrier flared, shielding Kalia, but it shattered under the wolf's assault, leaving her exposed. Ronan, Leela, and Torin fought to regroup, their attacks desperate but ineffective against the creature's power. Kalia's hand pressed harder against the tree, the dark energy surging through her, amplifying her connection to the curse. She felt it, the black wolf's essence, the curse's heart, tied to her through the ritual's price. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice ringing through the clearing, raw with desperation. The black wolf paused, its green eyes narrowing, as if intrigued. "You cannot stop me," it said, its voice a low growl. "The curse is yours now, Key. Embrace it or perish." Kalia's vision blurred, the tree's energy overwhelming, but she held on, the bond flickering in her chest. She didn't know how to fight the curse, but she knew she couldn't let it win, not yet. With a cry, she pushed back against the tree's energy, willing it to weaken, to give them a chance. The black wolf roared, its form shuddering as the tree's pulse faltered, and for a moment the clearing grew still. Riven staggered to her side, his hand gripping hers, his touch grounding her. "We're not done," he said, his voice rough but resolute. "We fight this together." The black wolf retreated a step, its eyes gleaming with a mix of anger and amusement. "This is only the beginning," it said, then turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving the team battered and breathless. Kalia collapsed against Riven, her body trembling, the tree's energy still lingering in her veins. The bond, though faint, held them together, but the black wolf's warning echoed in her mind. Sever the bond and unleash chaos. As the team gathered their strength, the cursed clearing silent but not defeated, Kalia knew the choice she faced would only grow harder, and the curse's shadow loomed larger than ever before. The cursed clearing vibrated with a sinister hum, the twisted tree at its heart pulsing like a dark heartbeat under the fractured moonlight. Kalia's hand still tingled from the surge of energy she had felt, the black wolf's words, "You are the key," ringing in her ears like a relentless echo.
The team stood battered but resolute. Riven, bloodied from his clash with the black wolf, his dark eyes fierce. Vera, her hands trembling as her healer's magic flickered. Ronan, gripping his spear with white-knuckled determination. And Leela and Torin, their wolf forms bristling, their growls low. The bond in Kalia's chest, faint and frayed, pulsed erratically, a fragile thread tying her to Riven amidst the chaos. Her pendant, the silver crescent moon, felt heavy against her skin, a reminder of the life she'd once known, now overshadowed by the curse's growing shadow.
The black wolf loomed at the clearing's edge, its massive form absorbing the moonlight, its green eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. Its presence was a weight pressing against Kalia's senses, amplifying the void left by the ritual's price. "You cannot stop what has begun," it growled, its voice a guttural rasp that seemed to shake the earth. "The key has opened the door." Riven stepped forward, his body tense, ready to shift. "Whatever you are, you're not taking her," he said, his voice low and fierce, his hand brushing Kalia's arm as if to anchor her. Kalia's heart pounded, the guardian's warning clashing with the black wolf's threat. Sever the bond or let the curse consume the pack. But the black wolf's claim that breaking the bond would unleash greater chaos left her frozen, the choice a labyrinth with no clear exit. Before she could speak, the wolf moved, its speed a blur, not toward the team, but toward the twisted tree. Its claws gleamed as it struck, tearing into the blackened bark with a force that sent a shockwave through the clearing. The tree groaned, a sound like a dying beast, its branches shuddering as cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. A wave of chaotic energy erupted, a dark, shimmering force that slammed into the team, knocking them off their feet. Kalia hit the ground hard, her breath stolen, her vision swimming as the energy surged around her, wild and untamed, like a storm unleashed. The bond flared, sharp and painful, as if the chaos were trying to rip it apart. "Get up," Riven's voice cut through the haze, his hand pulling her to her feet. His face was pale, blood streaking his cheek, but his eyes burned with defiance. "We need to move." The team scrambled, disoriented, as the tree continued to fracture, its dark energy spilling outward, twisting the air into distorted shapes. The rogues, their yellow eyes glowing in the shadows, howled, a chilling chorus that seemed to feed on the chaos. Vera's barrier flickered, barely holding, her face strained with effort. "It's breaking apart. The tree was holding the curse's power." Kalia's eyes locked on the tree, its form collapsing into itself, the dark energy coalescing at a swirling vortex at its base. The guardian's words echoed, "You are the key." She felt it. The chaos wasn't just random. It was drawn to her, latching onto the void within her, the emptiness left by the ritual's price. "It's me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The chaos, it's coming from me." Ronan's spear was raised, his green eyes wide with alarm. "What are you talking about? We need to get out of here." "No," Kalia said, her voice firm, despite the fear clawing at her. I stepped toward the vortex, driven by instinct, by the guardian's cryptic guidance. I have to stop it. Riven grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Kalia, don't! You don't know what that thing will do to you." She met his gaze, the bond flickering between them, weak but stubborn. "I'm the key, Riven. If I don't try, this will destroy everything." The black wolf watched from the shadows, its green eyes gleaming with amusement, as if it knew what was coming. "Choose, key. Embrace the chaos, or let it consume you."
Kalia's heart raced, her hand reaching for the vortex, the dark energy pulling at her like a tide. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond, on the pack, on the faint pulse of hope that refused to die. The Guardian had said the bond was the pack's strength, but also its weakness. She didn't know how to sever it, but she could try to contain the chaos,
to hold it within her until they found another way. Her fingers brushed the vortex, and a surge of energy tore through her, cold and searing, like ice and fire intertwined. She screamed, her body trembling as the chaos latched onto her, sinking into the void in her chest. It was alive, a sentient force that whispered of destruction, of betrayal, of power. Her vision blurred, images flashing. Riven's face, the pack's lodge, her parents' smiles, all swallowed by shadows. The bond flickered, threatening to snap, but she clung to it, willing it to hold. "Kalia!" Riven's shout was desperate, his hands pulling her back, but the vortex held her, its energy anchoring her to the shattered tree. Vera's barrier collapsed, her strength spent, and the rogues surged forward, their yellow eyes locked on Kalia. Ronan, Lila, and Torin fought to keep them at bay, their movements frantic, but the chaos was too strong, its pull overwhelming. Kalia pushed against the vortex, her will a fragile shield against its power. "I won't let you win," she gasped, her voice raw. The chaos resisted, but she felt a shift, a weakening, as if her connection to the curse gave her a sliver of control. With a final desperate effort, she forced the energy inward, containing it within the void in her chest. The vortex shuddered, collapsing into itself, and the clearing fell silent. The tree now a splintered ruin, its dark energy gone, or so it seemed. Kalia collapsed, her breath ragged, her body trembling. Riven caught her, his arms strong despite his wounds, his dark eyes wide with fear. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I held it," she whispered, her chest aching, the void now heavier, as if the chaos had taken root within her. "It's in me now." Vera knelt beside her, her hands glowing faintly as she checked Kalia's vitals. "You're alive," she said, her voice shaking. "But the curse, it's not gone. It's part of you." The team regrouped, battered and shaken, their eyes darting to the shadows where the black wolf had stood. It was gone, its presence a lingering threat. Ronan's gaze was hard, his spear still raised. "What the hell was that?" "Kalia, you're not telling us everything." Kalia flinched, the weight of their suspicion cutting deeper than the chaos's pull. "I don't know everything," she said, her voice weak but honest. "The guardian called me the key. The black wolf said the same thing. The curse, it's tied to me, to the bond." Lila and Torin exchanged uneasy glances, their wolf forms shifting back to human, their faces pale. "Tied to you?" asked Lila, her voice sharp. "Are you saying you're the reason this is happening?" "No," Riven snapped, his voice a low growl. "She saved us. She's the only reason we're still standing." But the doubt in the team's eyes was clear, a crack in the pack's unity that mirrored the shattered tree. Kalia's heart sunk, the void within her growing heavier. The chaos she'd contained felt alive, whispering in the back of her mind, a reminder of the Black Wolf's warning, embrace it or perish. Riven helped her to her feet, his touch grounding her despite the tension. "We're going back to the lodge," he said, his voice firm, addressing the team. "We figure this out together. No one's blaming Kalia." Ronan nodded, but his eyes lingered on Kalia, wary and guarded. Vera placed a hand on Kalia's shoulder, her expression soft but strained. "We need to understand what's inside you," she said quietly. "This isn't over." As they trudged back through the woods, the moonlight casting long shadows, Kalia felt the weight of the pack's suspicion, the chaos within her a constant hum. Riven walked beside her, his presence a shield, but the bond between them was weaker than ever, strained by the curse's grip. The Black Wolf's words haunted her, sever the bond or unleash chaos. But now, with the chaos inside her, Kalia feared the choice was no longer hers. and the pack's trust was slipping away. The pack's lodge was a fortress of flickering torchlight and restless murmurs, the air heavy with the scent of pine and lingering fear. Kalia's footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as she followed Riven through the dimly lit corridors, her body aching from the ordeal in the cursed clearing. The chaos she'd contained within her, a dark, sentient force, hummed in her chest, a constant reminder of the Black Wolf's warning and the Guardian's cryptic guidance. The bond with Riven, once a vibrant thread, was now a faint whisper, strained by the ritual's price and the curse's growing hold. Her hand brushed the silver crescent moon pendant at her neck, its familiar weight a small comfort against the suspicion in the pack's eyes and the void in her soul. Riven led her to the archive room, a dusty chamber tucked deep within the lodge, its walls lined with shelves of ancient tomes and scrolls. The team, Vera, Ronan, Leela, and Torin, had stayed behind in the main hall, tending to wounds and calming the pack, but their wary glances had followed Kalia, their doubt a silent accusation. She couldn't blame them. The chaos within her felt like a living thing, whispering doubts of her own. Riven's presence beside her was steady, his broad shoulders filling the narrow doorway, but the tension in his jaw and the shadows in his dark eyes betrayed his own unease. "We need answers," Riven said low, as he pulled a heavy iron key from his pocket and unlocked a carved wooden chest in the corner. The elders kept records of the pack's history, its magic. If the curse is tied to the pack's foundation, it'll be here. Kalia nodded, her throat tight. The Black Wolf's words, "You are the chaos's vessel," clung to her like damp earth, and the Guardian's warning about severing the bond loomed like a storm cloud. She stepped closer as Riven opened the chest, revealing a leather-bound journal, its cover worn, but etched with intricate runes that glowed faintly under the torchlight. "The Elder's Journal," Riven said, his voice reverent, as he lifted it carefully, dust swirling in the air. They sat at a rough-hewn table, the journal between them, its pages yellowed and brittle. Kalia's fingers trembled as she opened it, the faint hum of the chaos within her intensifying, as if the journal itself recognized her. The script was in an ancient dialect, but Vera had taught her enough to decipher the looping runes. As she read, Riven leaned close, his cedar and musk scent grounding her, though the bond flickered weakly between them. The journal spoke of the pack's founding, a pact forged with primal magic to bind the wolves to the land, their strength drawn from a sacred tree, the same tree now twisted and shattered in the cursed clearing. The tree was a conduit, Kalia read aloud, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. It channeled the pack's unity, its bond to the Alpha, to the land, but it could be corrupted, turned against us by a betrayal of trust. Riven's eyes darkened, his hand resting on the table, inches from hers. "Betrayal," he echoed. "Someone turned the tree against us. That's what created the curse." Kalia turned the page, her heart racing as the text grew more urgent. "It says the curse is a sentient force, born of fractured magic. It feeds on division, on broken bonds." Her voice faltered as she read the next line. "The severance of a fated bond can fracture the pack's unity, allowing the chaos to spread. The key, chosen by fate, becomes its vessel." Riven's eyes tightened, his hand clenching into a fist. "The key, that's you. When I rejected you," his voice broke, a rare crack in his Alpha's resolve. "I caused this. I fractured the bond and the curse took hold." Kalia's chest ached, the chaos within her stirring, as if responding to the truth. "It's not just you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I used the vial to save you. I paid the price, and now it's inside me." Riven's eyes met hers, filled with a mix of guilt and determination. "We'll fix this," he said, his voice low, resolute.
We'll find a way to stop it." Before Kalia could respond, a chill swept through the room, the torchlight flickering as if caught in a sudden draft. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and a shadowy figure materialized in the corner, its form cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing a faint, sickly yellow. Kalia's breath caught, the chaos within her flaring, sharp and painful, as if recognizing the presence. "You cannot stop it," the figure said, its voice a low, venomous hiss, echoing the black wolf's tone, but softer, more insidious. "The chaos has chosen you, Kalia Eldrin. You are its vessel now." Riven was on his feet in an instant, his body positioned between Kalia and the figure, his hands poised to shift. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a growl. "What do you want?" The figure's eyes gleamed, its form shimmering like smoke. "I am the shadow of your betrayal," it said, its gaze fixed on Kalia. "The curse flows through you, Key. The bond you cling to is its anchor. Sever it, and you free the chaos. Keep it, and you bind the pack to its doom." Kalia's heart pounded, the journal's words and the figure's warning intertwining. "You're lying," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "The Guardian said severing the bond could save the pack." The figure laughed, a chilling sound that made the torches flicker. "The Guardian speaks of hope, but hope is a fragile thing. The chaos is alive, and it grows within you. Every moment you hesitate, it spreads, tearing your pack apart." Riven's eyes flashed, his body tensing. "Get out," he snarled, taking a step toward the figure. "You're not taking her."
The figure's form wavered, its yellow eyes narrowing. "You cannot protect her, Alpha. The choice is hers, and hers alone." It turned to Kalia, its voice a whisper that seemed to sink into her soul. "Embrace the chaos, or watch it consume all you love." With a gust of cold air, the figure vanished, leaving the room silent but for the crackle of the torches. Kalia's hands trembled as she clutched the journal, the chaos within her humming louder, more insistent. "It's telling the truth," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I can feel it, the curse. It's growing inside me." Riven knelt beside her, his hand resting on hers, his touch warm despite the chill in the room. "You're not alone in this, Alpha," he said, his voice firm. "We'll find a way to stop it, together." But the pack's voices echoed from the hall, sharp with unease, their trust fraying as whispers of Kalia's role spread. She could feel their suspicion, a weight as heavy as the chaos within her. The journal lay open before her, its runes glowing faintly, a reminder of the pack's fractured foundation. The bond, weak as it was, tethered her to Riven, but the figure's warning lingered: sever it or doom the pack. The chaos was alive, and she was its vessel, the stakes higher than ever. Kalia closed the journal, her resolute hardening despite the fear. "We need to tell the others," she said, meeting Riven's gaze. "They deserve to know what we're facing." Riven nodded, his expression grim. "But they're scared, Kalia. They might not understand." "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But if I'm the key, I can't hide from this. Not anymore." As they left the archive room, the chaos within her pulsed, a dark heartbeat that promised more danger to come. The pack's unity was fracturing, and Kalia knew the choice ahead would test everything she was: wolfless, chosen, and now the vessel of a curse that threatened to tear them all apart. The lodge's main hall was a crucible of tension, the torchlight casting jagged shadows across the wooden walls. As the pack gathered, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, Kalia stood at the edge of the room, her heart heavy with the weight of the elder's journal clutched against her chest.
the chaos within her, a dark sentient force, hummed like a distant storm, its presence a constant reminder of the shadowy figure's warning. You are its vessel now. The bond with Riven, already frayed by the ritual's price and his earlier rejection, flickered faintly, a fragile thread strained by the growing unrest around them. Her pendant, the silver crescent moon, felt cold against her skin, no longer the comfort it once was. Riven stood at the center of the hall, his broad shoulders squared, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with the authority of an alpha, though the scar above his brow and the fresh wounds from the cursed clearing betrayed his weariness. Vera, Ronan, Leela, and Torn flanked him, their expressions grim, their weapons still close from the recent battle. The pack's murmurs grew louder, their voices sharp with unease, and Kalia noticed something chilling. Several members' eyes flickered with a faint crimson glow, a subtle but unmistakable sign of the chaos's influence. Her stomach twisted. The curse wasn't just within her. It was spreading, fracturing the pack's unity. "We need to address this now," Riven said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, commanding silence. "The curse isn't gone. It's tied to the pack's foundation, to the tree we destroyed, and it's affecting us all."
A warrior named Soren, his eyes briefly flashing crimson, stepped forward, his voice rough with anger. "And her?" He pointed at Kalia, his gesture sharp, accusing. "She's the one who touched the tree, who brought this chaos. Why should we trust her?" Kalia flinched, the weight of their suspicion pressing against her like a physical force. "I didn't bring this," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm trying to stop it. The journal says I'm the key, but I don't know what that means yet. I'm not your enemy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, others fearful. Leela, her gray eyes wary, spoke up. "Then why are we seeing this?" She gestured to a young shifter beside her, whose eyes flickered crimson before returning to normal. "It's spreading, and it started with you." Riven's jaw tightened, his voice a low growl. "Enough. Kalia saved me from the curse. She's risked everything for this pack. We don't turn on our own." But the doubt in the room was palpable, a fracture widening with every crimson flicker. Kalia's chest ached, the chaos within her stirring as if feeding on the discord. She stepped forward, clutching the journal tighter, her voice carrying a quiet resolve. "I have an idea," she said. "The journal mentions an ancient stone circle, a place of balance where the pack's magic was first forged. If we perform a ritual there, we might be able to contain the chaos, restore what's been broken." The room fell silent, the pack's eyes on her, some curious, others hostile. Riven's gaze met hers, the bond flickering, a faint warmth struggling against the void. "A ritual?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. "Based on what? A few lines in an old book?" Kalia's heart sank, the bond straining under his skepticism. "It's more than that," she said, her voice firm. "The Guardian called me the key. The journal says the stone circle can channel the pack's unity. If we can focus the magic there, we might stop the chaos from spreading." Vera nodded, her brown eyes thoughtful. "She's right. The stone circle is a place of power, older than the lodge. It could work." Ronan's green eyes narrowed, his spear resting against his shoulder. "Or it could make things worse. We don't know what we're dealing with. What if the chaos uses her to spread further?" Kalia's throat tightened, the chaos within her humming louder, as if mocking her. "I know it's a risk," she said, meeting Ronan's gaze. But doing nothing is worse. The chaos is already spreading. Look at their eyes. We can't wait. Riven's silence was heavier than the pack's murmurs, his dark eyes searching hers. The bond, weak as it was, carried his doubt, a crack in the trust she'd fought to build. "If you're wrong," he said finally, his voice low, resolute, "we could lose everything." "I'm not wrong," Kalia said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I can feel it, Riven. The chaos is tied to me, to the bond. This is our chance." He held her gaze, the bond flickering, a faint warmth struggling against the void. "All right," he said at last, his voice reluctant but resolute. "We'll go to the stone circle, but we do this together." The pack's murmurs grew louder, some agreeing, others protesting, their crimson-flecked eyes a stark reminder of the curse's reach. As preparations began, Kalia felt the weight of their distrust, the chaos within her stirring with every hostile glance. She followed Riven out of the hall, the journal clutched to her chest, the bond straining under the tension between them.
The stone circle lay deep in the eastern woods, a half-hour's trek through dense forest. The team, Riven, Kalia, Vera, Ronan, Leela, and Torin, moved swiftly, the moonlight casting long shadows across their path. Kalia's heart raced, the chaos within her pulsing in time with her steps, as if drawn to the circle's ancient power. Riven walked beside her, his presence steady but distant, his doubt a silent barrier between them. She wanted to reach for him, to strengthen the bond, but the chaos's hum held her back, whispering doubts of her own. As they neared the circle, the air grew heavier, charged with a primal energy that made Kalia's skin prickle. The stones loomed ahead, massive and weathered, arranged in a perfect ring, their surfaces etched with runes that glowed faintly under the moonlight. The chaos within her surged, sharp and insistent, as if recognizing the place. "This is it," Kalia whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. Before they could step into the circle, a guttural growl shattered the silence, followed by a chorus of howls. Yellow-eyed rogues burst from the shadows, their movements erratic, their gazes locked on Kalia with a chilling focus. "They're here for me," she said, her voice shaking as she backed toward the circle. Riven shifted into his black wolf form, his amber eyes blazing as he met the first rogue head-on. Ronan's spear flashed, Leela and Torin diving into the fray, their gray wolf forms snarling. Vera's hands glowed, weaving a barrier, but the rogues were relentless, their attacks aimed at Kalia, as if drawn by the chaos within her. "Kalia, get to the circle," Vera shouted, her barrier flickering under the assault. Kalia ran, her heart pounding as she reached the center of the stone circle, the runes flaring brighter as she stepped inside. The chaos within her surged, a dark tide that threatened to overwhelm her, but she focused on the journal's words, on the guardian's guidance. She knelt, pressing her hands to the earth, willing the circle's power to rise, to contain the chaos. The runes glowed, a pulse of energy rippling through the stones, but the rogues pressed closer, their yellow eyes glowing with hunger. Riven fought fiercely, his black fur bloodied, but the rogues' numbers were overwhelming. "Kalia, now!" he growled, his voice carrying through his wolf form. She closed her eyes, the chaos warring within her, the bond flickering like a candle in a storm. "Balance," she whispered, her voice raw, as she poured her will into the circle, praying it would hold. The runes flared, a wave of light pushing back the rogues, but the chaos within her fought back, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. The bond strained, Riven's doubt a weight that threatened to break it. And Kalia knew the ritual success hung by a thread, with her at its heart.
The stone circle stood like a sentinel in the eastern woods, its ancient stones etched with glowing runes that pulsed under the fractured moonlight. The air was heavy, charged with a primal energy that made Kalia's skin prickle as she stood at the circle's center, the elder's journal clutched against her chest. The chaos within her, a dark sentient force, roared like a caged beast, its whispers clawing at her mind, amplifying the void left by the ritual's price. The bond with Riven, now a fragile thread strained by doubt and the curse's grip, flickered faintly, a lifeline she clung to despite the pack's growing suspicion. Her silver crescent moon pendant hung heavy at her neck, a reminder of a life before the curse, now distant and fading.
Riven fought at the circle's edge, his black wolf form a blur of muscle and fury as he battled the yellow-eyed rogues that had ambushed them. Vera's hands glowed with healer's magic, her barrier flickering as she shielded Kalia from the onslaught. Ronan's spear flashed, striking a rogue's flank, while Leela and Torin, in their gray wolf forms, snarled and lunged, their movements desperate but coordinated. The rogues were relentless, their erratic attacks driven by the chaos, their glowing eyes fixed on Kalia as if drawn to the darkness within her. "Kalia, now!" Riven's growl cut through the chaos, his amber eyes meeting hers through the fray. Blood matted his black fur, but his resolve was unbroken, his strength a beacon amidst the turmoil. Kalia knelt in the circle's center, her hands pressing into the cold earth, the journal open beside her. The runes on the stones flared brighter, their glow casting eerie shadows across her face. The journal had described the stone circle as a place of balance, a conduit for the pack's primal magic, capable of restoring what the curse had fractured. But the chaos within her resisted, its whispers growing louder, mocking her efforts. "You cannot contain me," it seemed to say. "You are mine." She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond, on the faint warmth of Riven's presence, on the pack's unity that hung by a thread. "Balance," she whispered, her voice raw, trembling with determination. "I am the key. I can do this." She poured her will into the circle, willing the runes to channel the chaos, to draw it from her and contain it within the stones. The ground trembled, the runes blazing with a blinding light, and for a moment she felt the chaos shift, as if reluctant but yielding to her command. The rogues faltered, their yellow eyes dimming, their movements slowing as the circle's power surged. Vera's barrier steadied, her brown eyes wide with hope. "It's working!" she shouted, her voice strained but triumphant. But the chaos fought back. A dark pulse erupted from within Kalia, a wave of energy that twisted the air into distorted shapes like shadows given form. The runes flickered, their glow wavering, and a low, guttural laugh echoed through the clearing, not from the rogues, but from the chaos itself. A dark entity began to manifest at the circle's center, its form amorphous, a swirling mass of shadow and crimson light, its presence suffocating. Its eyes, twin orbs of burning red, locked onto Kalia, and its voice, a venomous hiss, filled her mind. "You cannot bind me, Key. I am you." Kalia's heart pounded, the chaos within her resonating with the entity, amplifying its power. The bond flared, sharp and painful, as if it were trying to tear it apart. "No!" she cried, her voice echoing through the circle. Ronan shifted back to human form, staggering to her side, his face pale, blood dripping from a gash on his arm. "Kalia, hold on," he said, his voice hoarse but urgent. He grabbed her hand, his touch grounding her, the bond pulsing between them, weak but defiant. "We do this together." The entity laughed, its form coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape, its crimson eyes narrowing.
Together, it mocked. Your bond is a chain, Alpha. It binds you to her doom. Kalia's hands pressed harder into the earth, the runes flaring again as she channeled every ounce of her will. Ronan's grip tightened, his strength flowing into her, their bond a flickering light against the entity's darkness. "We're stronger than you," Kalia said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "This circle is ours. This pack is ours."
The runes pulsed, a wave of light surging through the stones, pushing back the entity's shadows. The rogues howled, retreating into the forest, their yellow eyes fading as the circle's power grew. But the entity resisted, its form swelling, its crimson eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot contain me," it roared, its voice shaking the ground. "The key is mine." Kalia's vision blurred, the chaos within her fighting to break free, its whispers drowning out her thoughts. The bond strained, Riven's doubt from earlier lingering like a crack in their unity. She felt the entity's pull, its power latching onto the void within her, the emptiness left by the ritual's price. "Riven," she gasped, her voice breaking. "I can't. It's too strong." "You can," he said, his voice fierce, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You're the key, Kalia, not its vessel. You're stronger than it." His words sparked something within her, a flicker of defiance, a refusal to let the chaos win. She focused on the bond, on the pack, on the memory of her parents' love, her mother's pendant warm against her chest. With a cry, she pushed against the entity, willing the circle's runes to bind it, to trap the chaos within the stones. The light flared brighter, the entity's form shuddering, its shadows fracturing under the onslaught. But the ritual faltered. The runes flickered, their glow dimming as the entity's power surged, a dark wave that pushed back against the circle's magic. Kalia's body trembled, her strength waning, the chaos within her roaring louder. The entity's crimson eyes gleamed, its voice a whisper in her mind. "A deeper sacrifice is required, Key. Your bond, your heart, your essence. Give it or lose all." Kalia's breath caught, the Guardian's warning echoing alongside the entity's demand: "Sever the bond or doom the pack." But the entity's words hinted at something more, a sacrifice beyond the bond, something tied to her very being. She looked at Riven, his face etched with determination, his hand still gripping hers, the bond a fragile thread holding them together. "We're not done," Riven said, his voice a low growl. "Keep going, Kalia. I'm with you." The team fought at the circle's edge, their efforts barely holding back the rogues that circled again, drawn by the entity's power. Vera's barrier was gone, her strength spent, her face pale as she leaned against a stone. Ronan, Leela, and Torin fought with desperate ferocity, but the rogues were relentless, their yellow eyes glowing brighter as the entity grew stronger. Kalia's hands pressed harder into the earth, her will faltering but unbroken. "I won't give up," she whispered, her voice raw. The runes flared one final time, a pulse of light that pushed the entity back, its form shrinking, its crimson eyes dimming. But it wasn't enough. The chaos within her surged, threatening to overwhelm her, and the ritual faltered, the runes fading as the entity's laugh echoed through the clearing. Kalia collapsed, her breath ragged, Riven catching her before she hit the ground. "We're not done," he said, his voice fierce, but his eyes betrayed his fear. The entity retreated, its form dissolving into the shadows, but its presence lingered, a promise of more to come. The team regrouped, battered and shaken, the rogues vanishing into the forest. Vera knelt beside Kalia,
her hands glowing faintly as she checked her vitals. "You held it back, but it's not gone. The ritual, it needs more."
Kalia's chest ached, the chaos within her a heavy weight, the bond with Riven flickering like a dying flame. The entity's words haunted her, a deeper sacrifice. As the pack's eyes turned to her, their suspicion sharper than ever, Kalia knew the ritual's failure had only heightened the stakes, and the choice ahead would demand everything she had left. The stone's circle trembled under the weight of the faltering ritual, the runes flickering like dying stars against the encroaching darkness. Kalia knelt at the center, her hands pressed into the cold earth, her body a conduit for the ancient power that surged through the stones. The chaos within her roared, a tempest of shadows and crimson light that threatened to tear her apart from the inside. The bond with Riven, that fragile thread woven by fate and frayed by rejection and ritual, pulsed weakly, a desperate lifeline amid the storm. Her silver crescent moon pendant burned against her skin, a beacon of her past self, now overshadowed by the curse's relentless grip. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and blood, the rogues' howls echoing from the forest's edge, their yellow eyes glowing with hunger. The dark entity, the manifestation of the chaos, swirled before her, its amorphous form solidifying into a nightmarish shape, crimson eyes blazing with malevolent glee. "You dare bind me?" it hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers that clawed at Kadia's mind, amplifying the void left by the ritual's price. The entity lashed out, its shadows coiling like serpents, slamming into the circle's barrier with a force that shook the stones. Riven fought at her side, his black wolf form battered and bloodied, his amber eyes locked on the entity. He lunged, his claws raking through the shadows, but the entity twisted, its form reforming with a chilling laugh. Vera's magic flared one final time, her hands trembling as she poured her strength into the barrier, but it cracked under the assault, shards of light scattering like broken glass. Ronan, Lila, and Torin held the rogues at bay, their weapons and fangs a blur, but the pack's warriors were outnumbered, their growls turning to yelps as the chaos's influence spread, crimson flickers appearing in their eyes. "Kalia!" Riven's growl pierced the chaos, shifting back to human form mid-leap, his hands reaching for her. "Hold on, we're with you." But the entity surged, its shadows exploding outward, breaking free from the circle's weakening hold. A wave of dark energy crashed over the team, knocking them back, the air rippling with its power. Kalia's scream was lost in the roar as the chaos latched onto Riven, its tendrils wrapping around him like chains, pulling him into its swirling mass. His eyes widened, the amber glow flickering with crimson as the entity engulfed him, his form vanishing into the shadows. "No!" Kalia cried, her voice raw, the bond flaring in agony as she felt the chaos tear at him, threatening to consume his essence. The pack scattered, the rogues advancing with renewed ferocity, their movements synchronized with the entity's will. Vera collapsed, her magic spent, her breath ragged. "Riven," she whispered, her brown eyes filled with horror. Ronan fought to reach him, his spear thrusting into the shadows, but the entity swatted him aside like an insect, his body crashing into a stone with a sickening thud. Lila and Torin howled, their gray forms circling, but the crimson in their eyes grew brighter, the chaos's influence turning ally against ally.
Kalia's world narrowed to the entity, to the faint pulse of the bond pulling her toward Riven's engulfed form. Desperation fueled her, a fire igniting against the void within her. She channeled the circle's power, her hands digging deeper into the earth, willing the runes to respond. "I won't let you take him," she shouted, her voice echoing through the storm. The stones hummed, their runes flaring brighter, a pulse of light surging through her, amplifying her connection to the ancient magic. The chaos resisted, its whispers turning to screams in her mind, but she held on, her essence pouring into the ritual. A voice cut through the tumult, the guardians, soft and resonant, like a distant echo from the stones themselves. "Kalia Eldrin," it said, its tone heavy with sorrow and urgency. "The chaos is free, but you can bind it. The circle demands a final sacrifice, your essence as the key. Give it freely, and the balance may be restored. Hesitate,
and all is lost. Kalia's breath caught, her eyes locked on the entity where Riven struggled, his form flickering in and out of the shadows, his amber eyes pleading through the crimson haze. Sacrifice her essence? The very core of who she was, the wolfless shifter, the rejected mate, the key chosen by fate. It would mean losing herself, dooming her to an existence without the bond, without her place in the pack, perhaps without her very soul. Tears streamed down her face, the bond pulsing with Riven's pain, his desperation mirroring her own. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. The chaos within her surged, its dark tendrils wrapping around her heart, whispering promises of power, of release. But Riven's face, his scar, his dark eyes, the man who had rejected her yet fought for her, anchored her. The pack's cries echoed around her, their forms faltering under the rogue's assault, crimson eyes spreading like a plague. To save them, to save him, she had to choose. The entity laughed, its crimson eyes blazing. "Choose, Key, your mate or yourself." Kalia's hands trembled, the circle's power surging through her, the runes blazing as if urging her forward. The guardian's voice returned, softer now. "The sacrifice is not death, but release. Give your essence, and the chaos will be bound, but you will be changed forever." Changed. The word hung heavy, a promise of loss. Kalia hesitated, torn between the void within her and the bond's faint warmth. Riven's growl pierced the shadows, his form breaking free for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. "Kalia, don't!" he rasped, his voice strained, the chaos pulling him back. But she knew she had to, for the pack, for him, for the fragile hope that had kept her fighting. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking as she poured her essence into the circle, the silver pendant glowing hot against her skin. The runes exploded with light, the circle's power surging, pulling the chaos toward her, binding it to her sacrifice. The entity roared, its form convulsing as the light enveloped it, the shadows fracturing under the onslaught. The rogues howled, their crimson eyes dimming as the chaos's influence waned. Riven broke free, staggering toward her, his body shifting back to human, bloodied but whole. "Kalia!" he shouted, his voice raw with fear. She collapsed, the void within her expanding, her essence draining into the circle. The bond snapped, a final agonizing break, leaving her empty, changed. The chaos was bound, but at what cost? As darkness closed in, Riven's arms around her, Kalia wondered if she'd saved them or doomed herself forever.
The stone circle glowed with an ethereal light, the runes pulsing in time with Kalia's heartbeat as she knelt at its center, her hands buried in the cold earth. The chaos within her roared, a tempest of shadows and crimson whispers that clawed at her soul, threatening to tear her apart. The bond with Riven, now a mere thread frayed by rejection and ritual, flickered like a dying flame, its faint warmth the only anchor keeping her from being consumed. Her silver crescent moon pendant burned against her chest, a searing reminder of the life she'd once known, now eclipsed by the curse's relentless grip. The air was thick with the scent of blood and ozone. The rogues' howl silenced for now, their yellow eyes dimmed by the circle's power. But the dark entity, the chaos's manifestation, still loomed, its crimson eyes blazing, its form a swirling mass of shadow that pulsed with malevolent intent. Riven staggered at her side, his human form bloodied and battered, his dark eyes wide with desperation. The chaos had nearly consumed him, its tendrils leaving faint crimson streaks in his gaze, now fading but not gone. Vera, her strength spent, leaned against a stone, her gray braid loose, her hands trembling from the effort of her broken barrier. Ronan, Leela, and Torin stood guard at the circle's edge, their weapons raised, their faces pale as they watched the entity, its laughter echoing like a storm. The pack's unity hung by a thread, fractured by suspicion and the chaos's spreading influence. And Kalia knew the moment had come, the final sacrifice the Guardian demanded. "You cannot win," the entity hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers that sank into Kalia's mind, amplifying the void within her. "The bond is your weakness, Key. Sever it, or I will tear your pack apart." Kalia's chest ached, the Guardian's words clashing with the entity's threat. "Give your essence, and the chaos will be bound." But her essence, the core of who she was, the wolfless shifter chosen as the key, meant severing the bond completely, letting go of the fragile connection to Riven that had driven her to fight. Tears streamed down her face, her hands trembling as she pressed them deeper into the earth, the runes flaring brighter, their light a beacon against the darkness. "Kalia, don't!" Riven's voice was raw, his hand gripping her arm, his touch grounding her despite the chaos's pull. But Kalia shook her head, her voice breaking. "There is no other way," she whispered. "The Guardian said it, my essence, the bond. It's the only way to stop this." Riven's eyes darkened, a flicker of pain crossing his scarred face. "You'll lose yourself," he said, his voice hoarse. "I can't. I won't let you." The entity laughed, its shadow swelling, pressing against the circle's light. "Choose, Key, your mate or your pack." Kalia's heart pounded, the bond pulsing with Riven's fear, his defiance, his unspoken regret for rejecting her. The pack's faces flashed in her mind, Vera's kind eyes, Ronan's reluctant trust, Leela and Torrent's fierce loyalty, even the pack members who doubted her. They were her family, broken and flawed, but hers. And Riven, despite everything, was her mate, the one fate had chosen, the one she'd fought for. The chaos within her surged, whispering promises of power, of release, but she pushed it back, focusing on the bond, on the circle, on the runes that glowed with the pack's ancient magic.
"I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling as she closed her eyes, reaching for the bond's fragile thread. With a cry, she poured her essence into the circle, severing the bond with a final, wrenching snap. The pain was blinding, a void opening within her, deeper than any she'd felt before, as if her soul had been carved away. The runes erupted in a blaze of light, the circle's power surging, enveloping the entity in a radiant wave. The shadow screamed, fracturing under the onslaught, the crimson eyes dimming as the chaos was pulled into the stones, bound by Kalia's sacrifice. The entity's form collapsed, its laughter fading into a final, echoing hiss. The rogues at the circle's edge froze, their yellow eyes dulling, their bodies slumping as the chaos's influence vanished. The air cleared, the oppressive weight lifting, the runes glowing softly now, their power spent but steady. Kalia's body gave out, her knees buckling as she collapsed, the void within her all-consuming, a darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. Riven caught her, his arms strong despite his wounds, his breath ragged. "Kalia," he whispered, his voice breaking as he cradled her against his chest. "Stay with me, please." Her vision blurred, the world fading, but she felt the warmth of his touch, the absence of the bond, a hollow ache. "Did it work?" she murmured, her voice barely audible, her body heavy with exhaustion. Riven's eyes, free of crimson, shone with unshed tears. "It's gone," he said, his voice hoarse. "The chaos. It's gone. You did it." Vera staggered to their side, her hands glowing faintly as she checked Kalia's pulse, her face pale with worry. "She's alive," she said, her voice trembling.
But she's changed. The sacrifice, it took something vital. Ronan, Leela, and Torin gathered around them, their faces a mix of relief and unease. The crimson flickers gone from their eyes, but the memory of the chaos lingering. "The rogues are retreating," Ronan said, his spear lowered, his green eyes fixed on Kalia. Whatever she did, it worked. But Kalia felt it, a lingering darkness within her. Not the chaos's roaring tempest, but a quiet, insidious shadow, like a seed waiting to grow. The bond was gone, its absence a gaping wound, but something else had taken its place, something she couldn't name. She tried to speak, to warn them, but her strength failed, her body slumping in Riven's arms. "We need to get her back to the lodge," Riven said, his voice firm despite his tremor in his hands. He lifted her, carrying her as if she were fragile glass, his step steady but heavy with grief. The team followed, their silence louder than any words, the weight of Kalia's sacrifice settling over them like a shroud. The trek back to the lodge was a blur, the forest's shadows blending into the night, the moonlight casting a pale glow over Riven's scarred face. Kalia drifted in and out of consciousness, the lingering darkness within her, whispering faintly, a reminder that the chaos might be bound, but not destroyed. The pack greeted them at the lodge, their faces a mix of awe and fear, the crimson gone from their eyes, but their trust in Kalia fractured, her role as the key now a mark of suspicion. Riven carried her to her room, laying her on the bed, his hands lingering as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You saved us," he said, his voice low, heavy with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Kalia, for everything."
She wanted to respond, to tell him she didn't regret it, but the darkness within her stirred, a quiet warning that chilled her. "It's not over," she whispered, her voice weak. "I can feel it. Something's still here." Riven's jaw tightened, his dark eyes searching hers, free of the chaos but filled with a new kind of fear. "We'll face it together," he said, his voice resolute. "Whatever it is, you're not alone." But as Kalia drifted into unconsciousness, the lingering darkness pulsed, a shadow that hinted at an unresolved threat, one that would demand more than she'd already given. The pack was safe, for now, but the cost of her sacrifice loomed, and the quiet whisper within her promised that the curse's shadow was far from gone. The pack's lodge was bathed in the soft light of dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the tall windows, casting a golden glow over the worn wooden floors. The air was heavy with the scent of fresh pine and lingering tension, the pack's relief tempered by the scars of the chaos that had nearly torn them apart. Kalia sat on the edge of her bed, her body aching, the void within her a constant gnawing presence where the bond with Riven once thrived. The silver crescent moon pendant at her neck felt like a relic of a past life, its weight a reminder of who she'd been before she became the key, before she sacrificed her essence to bind the chaos. The pack was safe, for now, but the quiet darkness within her whispered of a threat unresolved, a shadow waiting to strike. The hall outside buzzed with cautious optimism, the pack's voices softer than they'd been in days, their crimson-flecked eyes restored to normal. Vera had tended to the wounded, her healer's magic depleted, but her spirit unyielding. Ronan, Leela, and Torin patrolled the perimeter, their steps lighter, but their weapons close, as if the memory of the rogue's yellow eyes lingered in the forest shadows. Riven had stayed by Kalia's side through the night, his presence a steady anchor, though the absence of the bond left a hollow ache between them. He sat across from her now, on a wooden chair by the window, his dark eyes fixed on her, the scar above her brow stark in the morning light. "You're awake," he said, his voice low, rough with exhaustion and something deeper, guilt perhaps, or resolve. "How do you feel?" Kalia's hand brushed the pendant, her fingers trembling.
Empty, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The bond, it's gone. And there's something else inside me, Riven. A darkness. It's quiet now, but it's there. His jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. The chaos, he said, his voice heavy. You bound it, but it didn't leave you, did it? She shook her head, her throat tight. I don't think it ever will. The elder said my essence was the price, but the entity, it said I was its vessel. I don't know what I am anymore. Riven leaned forward, his dark eyes intense, searching. You're Kalia Eldrin, he said, his voice firm. You're the one who saved us, who faced the chaos when no one else could. You're not its vessel, you're stronger than it. Her chest ached, his words a balm that couldn't fully soothe the void. I don't feel strong, she said, her voice breaking. The pack looks at me like I'm a threat. They think I caused this. They're wrong, he said, his voice a low growl. They're scared, but they'll see the truth. You're one of us, Kalia, always have been. She wanted to believe him, but the pack's wary glances, their whispered doubts, echoed in her mind. The elder's journal, now tucked safely in the archive room, had revealed her role as the key, but it offered no answers for what came next. She stood, her legs unsteady, and crossed to the window, the dawn's light warm on her face. What if it's not over? She asked, her voice soft. Before Riven could answer, a sharp pain lanced through her skull, sudden and searing, pulling her into darkness. She gasped, clutching the windowsill, as a vision swallowed her whole. She stood in a vast misty expanse, the ground soft and shimmering, like the Guardian's realm, but colder, more foreboding. The air pulsed with a faint crimson glow, and a figure emerged, not the Guardian, but a shadow of herself, her eyes glowing red, her form wreathed in dark energy.
You bound me, but I am not gone, the shadow Kalia said, her voice a chilling echo of Kalia's own. The chaos has shifted, taken root in you. A greater threat comes, one you cannot stop alone. Kalia's heart raced, the pendant burning against her chest. What threat? She demanded, her voice trembling. What are you? The shadow smiled, a cruel twist of her own lips. I am what you've become, it said. The key, the vessel, the fracture. The chaos waits, and it will rise again through you. A new figure appeared, cloaked and faceless, its presence radiating malice. The pack's foundation is broken, it hissed, its voice familiar, like the black wolf's but softer, more insidious. You cannot stop what comes. The chaos is eternal. The vision shattered, Kalia's gasp echoing in the quiet room as she stumbled back, Riven catching her before she fell. What happened? He asked, his hand steadying her, his dark eyes wide with concern. A vision, she said, her voice shaking. The chaos. It's not gone. It's inside me, waiting. And something else. A threat, bigger than before. Riven's expression darkened, his hands tightening on her shoulders. We stopped it once. We'll do it again. Kalia met his gaze, the absence of the bond a hollow ache, but his resolve sparked something within her, a connection, not born of fate, but of choice. The pack doesn't trust me, she said, her voice steadying, but I can't stop fighting, not now. He nodded, his scarred face softening. Then we fight together, not as mates, not as fate's pawns, but as us. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Kalia's heart stirred, a flicker of warmth in the void. Not the bond, but something new, something they could build.
Together, she echoed, her voice firm despite the lingering darkness within her. They stepped into the hall where the pack was gathered, their faces a mix of relief and unease. Vera approached, her brown eyes gentle but worried. "You're up," she said, her voice soft. "The pack's recovering, but they're scared. They need to know what's next." Kalia took a deep breath. The journals weighed in her memory, the visions warning a shadow in her mind. "The chaos isn't gone," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, silencing the murmurs. "I bound it, but it's still inside me. The vision showed me a greater threat coming, something tied to the pack's foundation. We need to prepare." Soren, the warrior who'd accused her before, stepped forward, his eyes no longer crimson, but still sharp with doubt. "And we're supposed to trust you? You're the one carrying this thing." Riven's growl cut through the tension, his presence commanding. "She saved us," he said, his voice low and fierce. "She's the reason we're standing here. We don't turn on our own." Ronan nodded, his green eyes meeting Kalia's with reluctant respect. "What's the plan, then?" he asked, his spear resting at his side. Kalia's gaze swept the room, the pack's eyes on her, some wary, others hopeful. "We rebuild," she said, her voice steady. "The journal said the pack's strength is its unity. We find out what this threat is, and we face it together. I'm the key, but I'm not alone." The pack murmured, some nodding, others hesitating, but the tide of suspicion seemed to shift, if only slightly. Riven's hand brushed hers, a silent promise, their connection no longer bound by fate, but forged by shared resolve. The darkness within Kalia stirred, a quiet whisper of the chaos's lingering presence, but she pushed it back, her will stronger than its pull. As the pack dispersed to prepare, Riven and Kalia stood together, the dawn's light streaming through the windows, a new day dawning but shadowed by the threat to come. The chaos was not gone, and the vision's warning promised a battle greater than any they'd faced, but for the first time, Kalia felt a spark of hope, not in fate, but in the choice to fight, side by side with Riven, for a pack that might yet become her home. To be continued. Like, share, and subscribe to show the author's support and love.